What's up, everyone? It's Andrew Bone here with BamaInsider.com. Just wanted to bring you guys a final video before we enter the next decade. Happy New Year to everyone, by the way. Very exciting to enter a new decade, 2020. Obviously, a lot went on in the 2010s, and this little update, I just wanted to kind of give you guys my biggest moments of the recruiting decade. Everything that kind of happened. And I've got a lot more actually on BamaInsider.com today. So if you guys want to go over to BamaInsider.com, I'm talking about the good and the bad moments of the decade in terms of recruiting. What kind of the good things that happened for Alabama, and then obviously some of the guys that ended up going elsewhere that a lot of us thought were going to end up in Tuscaloosa. So anyway, what I was going to do today for you guys here on our Bama Insider YouTube channel is kind of give you guys my top 10 recruiting moments in a positive light for Alabama. And it doesn't necessarily mean this was the biggest name that committed to Alabama in this recruiting class, or this guy was an All-American. These are just stories that I remember. Guys, I've been covering recruiting since 2003. I started covering recruiting back when I was just a freshman in college, and we're entering a new decade here in 2020, and obviously wanted to talk to you guys about 2010 to 2020. So kind of what happened. Some of the big news. A lot of you guys will remember a lot of these stories. I was kind of front and center in a lot of these, just covering these recruiting battles and kind of watching it unfold, and obviously talking about them every single day on on the message boards and reporting about it. So let's start off. This was probably it's kind of a toss up between one and two, but we'll talk about the first one, Rashaan Evans in 2014. What a big get for Alabama. A guy that from Auburn High School, grew up in Auburn. His dad signed with Auburn. His mom went to Auburn. I mean, big Auburn family. A lot of people were assuming that he was certainly going to go to Auburn. And then, throughout his entire recruitment, Alabama was really on the outside. I think even entering his senior season, didn't even have Alabama in his top six. But Alabama kept chipping away, did a great job recruiting him throughout the entire process. And Kirby Smart, was the lead recruiter for Rashaan Evans throughout his entire recruitment, and did a great job recruiting him to Alabama. When he announced for Alabama on signing day, it was, I think, everybody probably spit out whatever they had in their mouth, because, my mouth just dropped. I was like, just completely shocked. Not that I thought Alabama was, definitely out of the race, but if people remember, I think it was the Auburn website, Auburn's official athletic website, had already put him up as a signee, as an Auburn signee. So, it was kind of like a giveaway before he announced, his commitment or anything like that. Everybody was just, all right, well, Auburn let it slip early. He's going to Auburn. It's a done deal. Why is anyone even watching this announcement anymore? And then he announces for Alabama. So it was certainly a big shock. We had a big interview with Rashaan and his father after the after probably a few days after. Man, the amount of negativity that they received, in their hometown, that was certainly tough. I mean, obviously, you're a big time recruit. You're a 5-star. You're a number one player in the state of Alabama. You live in Auburn. You have so many connections. Obviously, there's going to be, not everybody. I mean, most people are very respectful, but there's certainly going to be some people that are going to be very negative about that, and that would happen just about in any city. It's not. I don't think it's a reflection on a whole community, but there's certainly some bad apples that try to just say the worst things to you when you commit somewhere else. So they took it, but obviously things extremely worked out extremely well for Rashaan at Alabama with his entire career. So that was a big moment for Alabama. Getting him on board. just stunning Auburn because, like I said, Alabama was completely on the outside heading into his senior season, and they just kept chipping away. And I remember, sitting down with his dad at the Under Armour All America game. I guess it was about a month before signing day, and his dad saying, I'd really watch out for Alabama because they're certainly still in the mix here. I think his brother was over there yelling "Roll Tide." I think he was a big fan of him going to Alabama, but yeah, I mean, I was certainly certainly a big moment for Alabama. Number two, and this could be number one easily, like I said, was Landon Collins. I mean, back in 2012, Landon was it was an Alabama LSU battle, throughout the entire process, and we see that a lot with the kids in Louisiana. It was especially these elite kids, and how many of them, Alabama and LSU have battled for. Throughout the last several years, ever since Nick Saban, arrived at Alabama, and Landon Collins' commitment to Alabama at the Under Armour All-America game, sitting down, with his mom, shaking her head no. She was saying that she wanted him to go to LSU. I think everyone who watched that moment, who follows recruiting, was 100% sure that Landon was going to end up at LSU, and he almost did. I mean, he did take a visit, another visit down to LSU after that. It's not like he signed early or anything. I don't think the early signing period, the early signing period did not exist, back in 2012. So, there was definitely some nervousness that, before he ended up, signing with Alabama, that he potentially could end up at LSU because that's where his mom wanted him to be. But guess what? He ends up sticking with Alabama, obviously having a tremendous career in the NFL, and was an All-American at Alabama, and won a couple national championships. All right, number three, the Tj Yeldon Flip. Wow, I mean, back in 2012, another guy in 2012 that I think a lot of people assumed that was going to happen throughout the entire process. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But the fact that he just continued to say he was 100% solid with Auburn, I don't think anybody at Auburn was really worried about it too much. I think most of the, if I remember correctly, most of them were, thinking that he was 100% on board as well. And a lot of times you have to kind of just go by what recruits are telling you, and that's what TJ was saying the whole time, was he was solid. But I'll never forget. I was at a 7-on-7 tournament out at Hoover High School, and I think it was in July before his senior season. And I was talking to his teammate Ryan Anderson, who obviously many Alabama fans know who Ryan Anderson is. He started for the Washington Redskins now, and was a big star at Alabama. He was his teammate at Daphne High School, and Ryan kept telling me he's going to flip to Alabama. He's going to flip to Alabama, and we just you were never sure if that was really going to happen, because you hear that all the time in recruiting. When guys are trying to flip their teammate or flip their friend or flip even somebody from all the way across the country. A lot of these recruits are on social media trying to get these guys to jump on board with you. But you just never know what's going to happen. Well, I guess it was at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. TJ hadn't really talked to anybody in a while, and there was just so much speculation that he was going to flip. And I remember all these, first day of practice, all the media just surrounded him. I don't know if anybody talked to anybody else, at least not at first. Everybody was just, surrounding him, asking him, what's his commitment status to Auburn? Is he going to flip? And he pretty much said, once again, 100% solid, not going to flip. And then he ends up, I guess it was about a week later, I'd gotten an email from one of his coaches saying, hey, look out for an email, going to send you something. And I said, well, you got to tell me what it is. What am I expecting? Well, you're getting it first. We're going to send it to everybody else here soon, but we'll email it to you right away, and you can break the story. It's like, okay, well, I got a feeling I know what this is. So it was a Sunday afternoon. It was right after church. I think it was around like 12:30, 12:45. And then around 1 o'clock, I got an email. And it was a statement from TJ announcing his decommitment from Auburn, commitment to Alabama, and it was a dead period. So we went into a dead period right then, and he ends up being 100% on board with Alabama. He enrolled early as well, so enrolled in January, and that was that. I mean, I think that's not that it sent shockwaves, but I think just kind of the way it all unfolded. A lot of people, he knew that Alabama was in the race, but a lot of people also thought, all right, this is just kind of a thing, but he's going to end up sticking with Auburn, but ends up flipping to Alabama, and obviously had a very good career at Alabama. I know that some of these things haven't gone well in favor of Auburn over the course of the last 10 years, and we're about to hit on some other guys that ended up spurning Auburn for Alabama. And sorry, Auburn fans, I know it's tough, but these were some big moments for Alabama, and this is what we're having to talk about. So not really meaning to single you guys out, but this is what kind of went in favor of Alabama. So number 4, obviously people knew we were going to talk about him, was Reuben Foster. Reuben Foster grew up a big Alabama fan. Committed to Alabama when he was a sophomore. Over in Georgia, and over at Troup County High School in Georgia. He actually was from Leeds, so big Alabama fan. Committed to Alabama. Well, stayed committed to Alabama for what was it, about a year and a half. He was committed to Alabama, and then there were starting to be some rumblings after he transferred to Auburn High School for his senior season that Auburn was very much in the picture. Trooper Taylor had been recruiting him really hard for Auburn, and then he ends up committing. I can't remember if it was June or July. Commits to Auburn, and I want to say it was July, but off the top of my head, I can't remember. So ends up committing to Auburn. I think the day after he committed to Auburn, posted about his Auburn tattoo on his forearm, and you just assume that it's officially done. That there is no chance that he's going to end up in going anywhere else, especially when he gets a tattoo of Auburn on his forearm. But guess what? I guess we can never assume. A kid's going to go to that school if they get a tattoo of them on their forearm or back, wherever it may be. And he was certainly he was pretty much a rock solid commitment. But that was, if many people remember, that was also the year that they fired Gene Chizik. Trooper Taylor was no longer retained, so he reopened his recruitment. And another guy that Kirby Smart recruited, continued to recruit. Until the very end, and Alabama ends up gaining his commitment. It was an interesting way it went down because he was like I said, he was a long time Alabama commitment, then a long time Auburn commitment, then kind of reopened his recruitment after the whole coaching staff was not retained at Auburn, and took an official visit earlier in January to Alabama, and then took that last weekend trip to Auburn. Well, many people remember he ended up leaving his official visit to Auburn on Saturday and making it over to Tuscaloosa to hang out on Saturday night. So that certainly didn't sit well, with Auburn. He ends up, I think it was maybe the Monday night, a couple days later, he ends up announcing his commitment on television to Alabama, and put on. He had a straw hat, an Alabama straw hat that he put on that Nick Saban loves to wear. There was still some talk leading up until signing day, if he was going to stick with Alabama or if he was potentially going to sign with Auburn, but obviously signed with Alabama, and we know the rest. All right, another win over Auburn here, guys. Sorry, Auburn fans. Cyrus Quan Joe is going to be our 5th guy that we talk about here. Cyrus Quan, many people remember back in 2000 and I guess it was 2010, his brother Ari Quan Joe signed with Alabama, committed to Alabama maybe a day or two before signing day. a lot of people knew about his brother already. Everybody knew that Cyrus, his younger brother, was going to be a 5-star prospect, a top 20 overall recruit in the country, and many people just assumed wherever Ari was going to go, that's where Cyrus was going to go, because he took all of his official visits. When Ari took all of his official visits, Cyrus went on all those trips with him. And then, Cyrus was in Tuscaloosa a lot. He didn't really visit many other schools. Everyone just assumed throughout the entire process that Cyrus was 100% going to Alabama. I mean, there was no doubt about it. And then final weekend before signing day, Cyrus takes an official visit to Auburn. And, still didn't really think much of it. Now, there was some buzz out of Auburn about his official visit. Now, there's buzz out of every school. No matter who it is, there's buzz out of every school after an official visit weekend on just about every prospect, because, official visits are fun. I mean, there's never a boring official visit. I mean, it's going to be, one of the best experiences of a recruit's life. And something he'll never forget. So he goes to Auburn the final weekend before signing day, and then he gets to his announcement on that Wednesday on signing day. His parents are there. It's an ESPN announcement. Cyrus announces his commitment to Auburn. I mean, stunned everyone. I mean, stunned his family. I mean, you can see the kind of disbelief on their face when he announced it. And we actually had a reporter there at the press conference, and even though it was on television, we still had someone there. And I remember getting a call after saying, "Hey, he's not going to sign with Auburn." I was like, "Well, I need a little bit more information than that, because I can't just put that out there that he's not signing with Auburn, because I'm going to get a lot of negative feedback from one particular fan base if I say he's not signing with Auburn." So we got a little bit more confirmation, put it out there. Of course, we were told we were wrong. That was not going to happen. That he was definitely signing. That we were just trying to create some drama to get some attention on our site, which clearly we were not. But he ends up not signing, and I finally got a call on Saturday. It was a few days later, because I had actually gone to Biloxi with some friends. My birthday fell on signing day that year, and obviously didn't really celebrate on signing day, but some of my buddies took me down to Biloxi a few days later to kind of celebrate my birthday, signing day. And, I think we were sitting down at a table around maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and got a phone call that said that, all right, it was done. He was signing with Alabama. So, I thought that was another big moment that a lot of people are going to remember, because he went on there, announced for Auburn. We remember videos of that went out of the Auburn coaches celebrating the win when Cyrus announced his commitment, and then he ends up signing with Alabama. So I thought that was another big moment for Alabama. All right, let's talk about Da'Shawn Hand. Da'Shawn Hand was, as many remember, the #1 player in the country, according to Rivals.com. Definitely a major recruit. Was a guy that visited Alabama during his junior year, and there was a lot of speculation that Alabama was in the driver's seat, that they had a great big old lead for him as a junior. But by the time he had become a senior, after he had taken some summer visits, spring visits, we'd kind of gone into his senior year, knowing that Alabama was on the outside, that they weren't in great shape to get his commitment. Well, that's what I always tell people on our board on BamaInsider.com. I say, you always have a chance if a kid will take an official visit. If they can come on campus for an official visit with their family, learn more about the program, spend time with the coaches, spend time on the campus, learn everything that you're going to be doing, especially if you're big into academics, and you can sit down with the dean of the school and talk to him about what your plan is, what you want to do, and they lay it out for you. Well, Dean Carr, engineering dean at Alabama, did a remarkable job, spending time with Da'Shawn Hand when he came on his official visit. Now, he had already taken an official visit to Michigan, and it was, a lot of people just had assumed that he was going to end up at Michigan. I mean, they were the heavy favorite for him, and I remember Rivals ended up doing the live stream of his announcement. It was an announcement on NBC, which Rivals and NBC were partners at the time doing these announcements. And I think Deshaun Hand was the first big one that they had done together. And he announced for Alabama, and it was kind of shocking. I think that there was some belief that he could end up at Alabama, but most were still just 100% positive he was going to end up at Michigan. I think I said on our board, it would not surprise me if he ended up at Alabama. I think I took some flack for that, just because everyone was just assuming that he was 100% done for Michigan. But he ends up, announcing for Alabama, and that was another big win for the Crimson Tide. So let's talk about Derrick Henry. Former Georgia Bulldog commitment. Committed to Georgia when he was I think it was just a junior at the time, and continued to get recruited by Alabama. Really kind of just came out and said, even when he was committed to Georgia, which was pretty interesting. He was quoted as saying that he felt like Alabama was a better fit for him than Georgia, even when he was committed to Georgia. So we kind of saw the writing on the wall that he was eventually going to flip, to Alabama, or reopen it, which he did. He reopened his recruitment, kind of let the recruiting process play out. Enjoyed some visits, but he was always going to Alabama. Nothing too crazy went on besides obviously the decommitment from Georgia, but he was Alabama's second Heisman Trophy winner. You look at a guy who's 6'3", 240 pounds. Who would have thought that he was going to be the running back that he was in college and in the pros? NFL rushing champion after yesterday for the 2019 season. Obviously put up just remarkable yardage during his high school career, and then ends up having a remarkable college career and obviously an NFL career. That was an interesting year because Alabama signed 4 running backs in that class. You just never thought that Alabama was going to sign 4 backs. They got 3 backs in this year's class, which seems like a high number, but 4 backs was just kind of unheard of at the time. And obviously, Derrick was really the only guy that ended up sticking with Alabama. Al-T. Tenpenny ended up transferring to Auburn. They unfortunately died in a car wreck. Tyron Jones ended up transferring out, and then Alvin Kamara, a star in the NFL, also ended up transferring out as well. So, but Derrick Henry worked out just fine for Alabama, and had obviously a great career, and that was a big moment for Alabama to get him to get away from his commitment to Georgia, commit to Alabama, stick with Alabama, even though Alabama had some running back commitments throughout the process, and then obviously they were continuing to recruit some guys. But obviously, as many people remember, everyone tried to say that Derrick Henry was not going to be a running back in college. Everybody said he was too big. He was going to grow into a linebacker, a defensive end, defensive tackle. I mean, he was just, there was no way he was going to end up being a running back in college. And, that came from everywhere. Alabama recruited him strictly as a running back. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's what we continue to report on. But, anybody who's an analyst out there, nobody was certain that he was going to end up being a running back. If they tell you they were certain, they're lying to you. I mean, he may have been ranked as a running back in some places, but it was a toss-up. Nobody was sure how big he was going to get, and how well he was going to perform. But he definitely changed a lot of minds when he got to Alabama and put up the numbers and performances that he did on a weekly basis. All right, we're getting down to the last few biggest moments that I remember covering recruits throughout the process. Now, like I said earlier, I'm going to post a lot more on BamaInsider.com, a lot more moments good and bad. These are just kind of my top 10 that I wanted to share with you guys real quick before we ring in the new year. Number 8, Najee Harris. Man, that was a fun recruitment to follow, wasn't it? Back in 2017, Alabama, Michigan. Big storyline this week. With Najee Harris, and most people remember that tight recruiting battle. Najee committed to Alabama. I think before even his junior season. I mean, I think it was the summer before his junior season, something like that. It was crazy timing when he committed, and was committed for such a long time to Alabama, but continued to get interest from Michigan. Jim Harbaugh was recruiting him extremely well, and he took some visits to Michigan. I mean, there was definitely a lot of talk that he was going to flip. I mean, Tosh Sapoy, I thought, did a tremendous job recruiting him throughout the entire process and keeping him on board. I mean, there was a lot of crazy stories, leading up to his final arrival in Tuscaloosa. And I remember, he had played in the U.S. Army All-America game, and he even said there, he wouldn't tell anyone where he was going. I mean, he was still committed to Alabama, but he said everyone will know where I'm going when I get on my plane from California and fly to that university and begin my college career. There were a lot of coaches who weren't sure what he was going to do. On Alabama side, on Michigan side, everybody was just kind of waiting, and he ends up flying into Birmingham and starting his career at Alabama. So now we'll see how he does against Michigan. I'm sure this will be a big moment for him this week. So yeah, I thought that was a crazy recruiting journey that we followed throughout the entire process. All right, number 9. And this kind of has a mixture of a few different stories in here. It's kind of the quarterback carousel in recruiting, kind of what we saw. And it kind of started back in 2017. Many people remember, Jake Fromm was a long time Alabama committed to Alabama back in the summer. I mean, that's where he wanted to go. Well, then Kirby Smart ends up leaving Alabama and becoming the head coach at Georgia. Well, guess who follows him to Georgia? Jake Fromm. He recruited him, even though he wasn't a position coach or an offensive coach, he was his recruiter. And Jake Fromm decides to decommit from Alabama and commit to Georgia, shortly after. Alabama fans definitely up in arms. What's going to happen? We love Jake Fromm. We think he's, best quarterback in the country. Well, enter Lane Kiffin, who is, recruiting, Tua Tagovailoa out of the state of California. Wow, Hawaii, and does a tremendous job and brings him in and ends up landing Tua to replace Jake Fromm, and obviously we all know what happened in that in that national championship game a few years ago, until through the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime and led that comeback victory over Georgia. So obviously that was and Jake Fromm was the starting quarterback in that game as well. So we thought we were going to see a few more of those matchups between Fromm and Tua. Obviously, we saw it in the SEC championship game. Jaylen had to come in and finish that game for Alabama. But man, that was certainly a big moment for Alabama, ending up getting Tua. Who would have known how well Jake Fromm would have done? He did extremely well at Georgia. Could have done extremely well at Alabama as well. But I think Alabama fans, coaches, everyone pretty happy with getting to it. And then this year in this year's recruiting class, Alabama got a commitment from Carson Beck last summer. After he had attended Alabama's football camp, he was actually commitment to Florida on their baseball team. Florida baseball commitment, ends up getting an offer from Alabama, commits to Alabama, and then Alabama lost offensive coordinator Mike Locksley, who became the head coach at Maryland. But the deal that kind of sent Beck to decommit was Dan Enos, quarterback's coach, leaving Alabama to become the offensive coordinator at Miami. So Carson Beck decommits. Well, Alabama gets Steve Sarkisian, to come back, become the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and he starts recruiting Bryce Young. Well, Bryce Young, number 3 overall player in the Rivals 100, had an unbelievable senior season. Bryce Young, becomes Alabama's top target, and Alabama ends up getting Bryce Young. Now we won't know, obviously, for a few years, how it may work out for Bryce as compared to Carson Beck. We'll know that in a few years, but at least on paper, it looks like Alabama, got a big time quarterback in Bryce Young, certainly a big time talent, and I think they're pretty happy with the result. Now, we've seen some other quarterback situations at Alabama in terms of guys that have been committed and end up flipping and stuff like that. A lot of people probably forget about Ricky Town, being an Alabama commitment back in 2015, and being considered a top 5 overall player in the country. Well, his stock dropped significantly. He ended up decommitting from Alabama. Committed to USC. Alabama ended up getting Blake Barnett that year. I believe it was 2015. Well, Blake Barnett ended up transferring out of Alabama. But the following year, 2016, Alabama signed Jaylen Hertz. So, obviously we all know about Jaylen's career. And what he did for Alabama and his season at Oklahoma, taking them to the college football playoff. So remarkable career for Jaylen. Number 10, the final guy I want to talk about, but this was probably the most, I don't know if it's the most memorable moment because not a lot of people remember this, and I hope people will remember this. In the future, because it's something that Nick Saban did that we hadn't really seen, I guess, until that year, 2014. Elijah Shaw was a big-time defensive tackle recruit out of the state of Georgia, and suffered a neck injury and back injury during his senior season. More so, a neck injury, and was told he was no longer going to be able to play college football at all. Was told, his career was done. Well, he ends up getting a medical exemption scholarship for Alabama. Alabama says, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of you. We want you. We still want you at Alabama. This is a tough situation for everyone, and especially Elijah Shaw." Well, Alabama ends up honoring his scholarship. He didn't sign, but like I said, he was a medical exemption scholarship and graduated from Alabama last year. So shout out to Alabama for honoring that, and for him, he stuck around the football team. He was around the team, kind of as a assistant mentor, type guy, just helping out the younger players, and a lot of stuff gets said about Nick Saban. People don't realize how much he cares about the players and sticking with them, especially sticking with Elijah Shaw after he suffered his neck injury, knowing that he wasn't going to be part of the team in terms of getting out there on the field, but help the kid. He was the first guy in his family to graduate from college, and I don't think he would have any bad words to say about Nick Saban. With him, sticking with him and getting him on campus and now a college graduate. So congrats to Elijah Shaw in that regard. So those were kind of my top 10 moments of the 2010s. I'm talking about a lot of other big moments, good and bad, on BamaInsider.com. I posted that today. But I hope you all enjoyed this little recap of kind of what I remember from the last 10 years. Rashaan Evans going to Alabama instead of Auburn. Landon Collins' mom saying, "No, I don't want you to Alabama," and ends up sticking with Alabama. Tj Yeldon flipping his commitment from Auburn to Alabama. Reuben Foster, the Auburn tattoo, flipping back and forth, going to Tuscaloosa the weekend while he's in Auburn on an official visit. Cyrus Quan Joe announcing for Auburn instead of Alabama on signing day, and then signing with Alabama a few days later. Deshaun Hand Michigan, heavy favorite for him, ends up announcing for Alabama. Derrick Henry, Alabama's second Heisman Trophy winner, being a long-term Georgia commitment, ends up being one of 4 running backs in the recruiting class. Najee Harris, kind of his wild recruitment, up and down between Alabama and Michigan. Number 9, the whole story about Jake Fromm decommitting, Alabama getting Tua. Bryce Young ended up being a part of the class when Carson Beck goes out. And then finally Elijah Shaw, and Alabama honoring his scholarship, and being a college graduate now after a neck injury that ended his playing career. So that's my top 10, guys. I hope you all have a great, happy New Year. We'll definitely be back in 2020 to bring you guys the very latest recruiting scoop, recruiting news. Enjoy celebrating. I hope you all have a great time, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again.